I'm going to talk about predecessors to human action. And I think when we think about this globally in terms of building virtual environments and experiences that replicate what we experience in the real world, I'm very thoughtful that there is a fair amount of work and data in terms of studying human behaviors in the real world that help to shape some of the work that's done in virtual environments. Think about all of the sensory inputs that go into one's mind before they actually take action and move. So in the medical field, our research team has thought a lot about what this means, even with respect to something as germane in an everyday interaction as the physical exam. We don't really talk about it in our textbooks, and I'm thoughtful as the more that our lab has sort of worked together and collaborated broadly, that we are starting to raise fundamental questions about how we train physicians. We, over 10 years ago, as we have begun using a variety of technology to capture, the human experience in healthcare when you're using your hands, we partnered with some of the world's experts in haptics. And one of our first experiments was to put sensors on mannequin or simulator parts. These are tools and technologies that medical students use to learn how to do certain physical exams and procedures. And so this was our first work, was putting sensors on those pre-existing teaching tools and looking to see what we could learn from how they do their exams, what are the differences, and then reflecting on why there's such a broad difference in the approach. This is what a clinical pelvic exam looks like in terms of sensor outputs. So it's the amount of force applied over time, and the different colors represent a different area of the anatomy. And this is someone else's exam. This person actually didn't do a proper examination, and this person would have missed the diagnosis if there had been a tumor or a lesion on the uterus. And so we go to, why is there such a difference here? And that began some of our research questions. We then went and looked at those complex data plots, force profiles, and we went to Klatsky and Letterman, and they really helped us. We said, well, start from the beginning. You know some of the common palpation techniques. Take yourself out of the clinical world and just do those techniques with your sensors and see which waveforms or sensor or force profiles will be generated. And that was really eye-opening for us to be able to go back and look at this world that we've lived in, having them do the full exam and then getting all of this complex data. And then it's like, okay, let's start all over. Let's go back to the basics. We then got really curious. We wanted to see what is the world and range of approaches and with your hands and your thought when you're doing these exams. So we created a physical exam registry by taking a variety of the simulators to a major medical meeting, and 400 physicians lined up to give their data. They were so curious, thought this was a great way to add another language to what it is that we do. We were wanting to do this so that we could better teach the students. The clinicians said, we want to have this information so we can better communicate with one another. What we noticed when synchronizing sensor and video data, we were able to look at hundreds of physicians during a simulated breast exam. And this study had 600 physicians. When you look at what they did with their fingertips, it was absolutely fascinating. So the rubbing people did this movement across the breast tissues. The ones who did padding, we couldn't find a language for it because no one had ever described it. But this is something that hundreds of physicians do every day, and we never really describe what they do with their fingertips. Others did this padding movement or vertical movement. And then there was a group that did this piano fingers. I mean, and these are clinicians who have been doing this exam for 20 years. They all approach it differently. It turns out actually that the rubbing movement tended to be more accurate. If you use the piano fingers movement, you were 4 times less likely to find a lesion. And that was absolutely fascinating. So what were the predecessors to the piano fingers? It had to do with sensory input. When you're a student and you're watching a clinician that you have placed at the highest level of knowledge in your mind, you want to emulate what it is that they do. And so what we learn is that students and learners watch others and they have a visual and emotional and a personal response to why they then formulate who they will be when they become a physician.